Catherine Austin Fitz, the founder of the Solari Report. We have, my gosh, we have wanted to have you on for years on this show. So finally get a chance to actually sit down and talk with you on a wide range of topics. The world has really changed a lot over the past few years. So I really just want to give you the floor today and shut up and let you do the talking. Maybe sort of a first place we can kind of start is, where do you think the biggest blind spots are right now when you look at the media, alternative media? What's the biggest story that you think no one is covering right now? And maybe the area of biggest concern to you that you're tracking in real time?
The biggest thing missing is that we are now coming into the biggest opportunity we've ever had to transform a situation. And
On a good side?
absolutely, absolutely.
Finally, some
And
good news. Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm going to use what's been happening in food and health as an example. And that's, my lane is money. What I'm interested in is programmable money. We're just about, I want to show you this. I'm very proud of it. We are just publishing new model legislation on how to put guardrails up on programmable money. And we will publish this. It's up in PDF now, but we will publish this in the fall, which is our whole thing on how to stop the programmable money. But and if you give me a mailing address, I'll send you one. But but I want to use food and health because I think it's somebody, it's something everybody understands. So at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a lot of excitement about the ability to get changes made in terms of food and health, because right now the American people are being poisoned and we want that to stop. And it's a matter of changing the rules related to food, allowing much more local food, local farming, and stop the poisoning and all the ingredients in the food. And then the same with pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot of hope, and many people organized into what's now called MAHA to go in and do something. And I would say that it has been a complete and utter failure, except that we have been able to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that the sausage factory in Washington is absolutely committed to poisoning us. Right? Would
Right.
you disagree? Right.
No, I wouldn't disagree at all. I mean, the fact that we can't even get certain things removed from store shelves has been a massive fight. You and I were talking here before we jumped on. I mean, I lived in Portugal for 5 years. You go to the grocery store, you're not going to see the same crap, the same
Right.
poisons that you'll get in an
Right.
American grocery store.
Right. Everybody says when I'm in the United States, oh, Europe's falling apart. I'm saying, no, they don't. Go buy food in Europe. It's not falling apart at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what has happened is that the experience of so many wonderful, talented, capable people giving it their all to get this changed, and the failure of it, they have managed to prove that there's no solutions in the sausage factory. And the time has come to move away, like the herd moves away from a diseased animal, move away from the diseased animal and start to go to work on real solutions, on real things we can do. Because let's face it, if you look at who's running this, they are few and we are many. We don't need them. Okay. And so now the time has come. And what I'm seeing all over the world, in Europe, in the United States, hearing it from countries all around the world where we have subscribers, is people are like, okay, I've had it with those folks. So I just got a wonderful call. I keep telling the story from a friend of mine who grew up in a wonderful place with a beautiful beach. And he went home for August to, hang out at his parents' house and just spend some time where he grew up. And he called me. He said, "You're not going to believe this. I went to the beach, and normally everybody's scrolling on their iPad or they're scrolling on their phone or they're talking on their phone." He said, "I couldn't see any phones or pads. Everybody's reading a hardback book or a paperback book." And I said to somebody, what's going on? This whole beach just went analog. And they said, all that stuff surveillance. We are so over all of that stuff.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Was this an American? I mean,
It
because
was
you're
not American, but it was close to America, as all I'll say.
I was just talking to our mutual friend Tucker Carlson about AI, and just and I said one of the areas that I'm most hopeful is in the younger generation now. And you're seeing this at restaurants, restaurant trends where young people are going to restaurants and they're not bringing phones, they're bringing like board games, they're not drinking alcohol,
Right.
they're they're bringing a stack of playing cards and they're just sitting for hours, and just that human connection. Like that might be one of the great benefits of this AI explosion is the need and the feeling for like actual real human connection
Right.
rather than sort of fake AI
I was
connections.
about 6 months ago, I was in Salt Lake. I was right beneath the state capitol. And I went down, there's a wonderful coffee shop just down the hill. And I walked in and it was all under 30 and all their music. They had these two turntables and they were playing LPs. And I said, "Oh, cool, you're playing LPs." He said, "Oh, the sound is much better than digital."
I love this move. You're seeing stories out of. There was a Los Angeles Times piece about 7 months ago featuring a store in LA called Vidiots. I think if I remember it correctly, Vidiots. It's video store where young people are now going on the weekends like we used to do in the 80s and 90s, and they're getting a VHS tape or a DVD. They're picking it
Oh,
out for their
wonderful.
and they're now opening multiple extra locations because young people are getting fed up with Netflix subscriptions. They're tired of not owning things. They're tired of not owning actual movies, physical
Well, and
media.
they're tired of surveillance. You
Yeah.
can feel, yeah. They want some kind of authentic experience, and they don't want to be under surveillance 24/7. Who can blame them?
Think about what passes through your family group chat in a normal week: school pickups, vacation plans, photos of the children, photos of the dog. Happens a lot in my family group chat. Medical updates, home addresses, financial decisions. You trust the people in the chat, but how much do you actually trust the platform that the chat is happening on? Well, that's why we want to introduce you to Keet. They give families another option. It's free messaging and video calling built peer-to-peer with end-to-end encryption and no centralized company database holding the family conversation. Keet doesn't track the metadata, and nobody needs to provide a phone number or an email to join, so you create your family group, share files and photos, and make audio or video calls, all without turning your home life into a corporate data profile. So check them out for yourself. Go to Keet, that's KEET.io/redacted. Download it for free, invite just one person you trust, and start a conversation that belongs just to you. So one more time, that's Keet, KEET.io/redacted.
So maybe I go back to your point about this Maha movement and because I know from sources inside the White House that there are some big guardrails preventing what RFK Jr. and has been trying to do,
Right.
and being paraded out there to sort of stand behind Albert Bourla in these press conferences is really humiliating. It's like a humiliation ritual. I don't know, but anyway, there are these guardrails certainly in Washington that don't want us to remove these things from our food supply.
Right.
So you're hopeful though that we're turning a corner.
I'm remarkably hopeful, and I'll tell you why. So I just have to mention this. Two things that just happened on vaccines. CDC awards 1.2 billion for new COVID shots for adults and kids. That's murder. That's mass atrocity.
How is this happening?
I'll tell you how it's happening. This is what they want. Right? So this is the worst one. If we have a big collection up at Solari on the effort worldwide to bottleneck the trade routes, sabotage energy to control the energy model. So some people call it the shift from the petrodollar to the petrogas dollar. But anyway, so we've got this big collection. It all depends significantly on execution by the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy just announced that they are mandating the sailors to take the new flu shot. Well, how are you going to win a war if you're poisoning your sailors? It's mRNA, right?
Well, I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing? And
Destroying
we've
America.
heard so many. We've interviewed so many people here on the show who are part of the military, who became whistleblowers, who were forced to get the vaccine, and then had, of course, massive injuries, cannot fly anymore. Helicopter pilot who's grounded, nearly paralyzed after taking the shot, all because they were forced to. U.S. Marine pilots flying out of Stuttgart, Germany, NATO pilots, just horrible vaccine injuries. Why are we doing this to our military?
Because we want to destroy it. I mean, sometimes the obvious is true, right?
It's Why would we want to destroy our military? Is it because we're not in charge? Is it because the globalists don't want us to have a military?
Well, that's a good question, but I want you to hold that thought for a second because the reason I'm so excited about the opportunity is I walked out of Washington in 1998 because I said, this is not going to work. This model's going to fail. I have to go in the wilderness and I have to find alternatives. I've been trying to find alternatives in Washington, but I finally realized people who are centralizing power are never going to support people decentralizing power.
Right.
Because I was trying to basically build venture pools and stock markets for local communities so they could, essentially get government money out of communities because you could do everything with private money. Anyway, so I left, and ever since then, almost everybody I know wants to not work on real solutions. They want to go reform Washington, work with Washington, work with Google, work with, OpenAI, they want to go help the enemy fix it for us. In other words, we're in a war, and you can't win a war by helping your enemy. You can't win your war by begging your enemy to change and to stop killing you. That's not how you win a war, right?
Right.
So what I am seeing for the first time is people beginning to realize, oh, it's a war. They're the enemy. We need to get as far away from them as possible, and we need to stop supporting them. Because if you go to any data center protest, what I will tell you is if I roll up all the IRAs, 401ks, and brokerage accounts at any data center protest, all of them are financing the thing they say they're trying to stop. Right? So if you look at where we go to work, who we're financing, where we bank, where we purchase, we are doing this. It's not them. We are doing this, and we have the power to stop. And the minute everybody says, this system is diseased, have you ever seen a herd of animals slowly get away from a diseased animal?
Yeah.
You know, Finally, we are watching people say, oh, there's no hope being productive. Talking to these people, I'm going to move away from the diseased animal. This is a diseased animal. I'm going to move away. And they're starting to move away and do really powerful things.
Where are the fracture points? I think you're right about this. Last night, our neighbors, one of which who used to work in the Reagan administration, lovely people, they just had a big America 250th celebration party and invited us over. And so it was a wonderful time. And they're all fed up with the people in Washington, all of them. And everyone was wearing American flag shirts, and it was incredible. It was like 100 people, and it was every one of them is just fed up. And to your point, turning away from these people. But where do you see the main fracture points here? And so maybe we could just take money, for instance. So if we're the idea of programmable money in Europe, when we lived in Europe, of course, we saw what was happening in Portugal and Spain, that you're not able to use cash beyond a certain limit, that you would be considered on the gray market, AKA a terrorist. If you wanted to pay your gardener, 500 euros in Spain or Portugal, sorry, you can't do that anymore. It all has to be tracked. So maybe let's just take money first as a fracture point. How do people turn away from that?
Okay, so the first thing you do is you get out of the big banks, stop financing your enemy. And, the United States is still blessed with a lot of great community banks and credit unions. And you need to have a good bank or credit union where you have relationships and they know you and they care about you. They don't do the kind of things the big banks will do to you. And the last thing you need is to wake up one day and discover that you and your business has been shut up by your bank and you've been debanked because you said the wrong thing or whatever.
Right.
So the first thing you need is you need a bank and credit union or credit union that you can trust and where you have a good, healthy relationship. So we have a great thing at Lear, a 4-part series on how to find a great local bank and create a good relationship. Okay. So that's the second thing you need to do is you need to make sure, if possible, that you can generate an independent income that doesn't require you to work for a company that's going to require you to poison yourself, right?
Right.
Or do things that, are going to hurt your soul to do. So, do everything you can to migrate your work or learn skills so you can migrate your work. So look at what you do now. You're independent, right? You have an independent income. So you've created your own thing. So for heaven's sakes, get your income to the point where you're doing something you love, you're doing something you have a passion for, and you have some independence if you can. Part of having that independence is paying down debt. So, unfortunately, in this country, the United States, we've essentially legalized usury. You need to do everything you can to get out of debt because debt is a weapon of war, and you get put in the corner. The next thing you need to do is you need to look at your balance sheet and your income statement, and you need to start to get big corporations out. So we have a piece, it's in PDF, it's up on the website, it's free, it's called Coming Clean. And coming clean is about getting your enemy out of your pocketbook, out of your mind, out of your body, out of your house. And let me give you an example. So, for many decades in America, we have gone from doing everything for ourselves to instead going to work, getting a paycheck, and then paying, big corporations to do various things for us. Those economics are changing now for a variety of reasons, including technology. So I was an investment advisor for 10 years, and I used to have a client who was always complaining that the yields on her stocks were going down and her water bill was going up. I said, this is very simple. Sell $10,000 of stocks. You live in a rural area, build a well. Get the water company out of your life and get the stocks out of your life. You don't, disintermediate the corporate guys. Now, everybody's different. And so what one person can do is not a good idea for another person. It could be your water, it could be your food. There's lots of opportunities if you have good local food systems to buy much more of your food from independent farmers or grocers. So, for example, 6 months plus of the year, I'm in the Netherlands. We had a group of local farmers create this wonderful website called Hofweb where they go around, they put it up on their website, they collect all the fruit from all the local farmers. You go to the website, you pick out what they want, and then they bring it to your door twice a week in these plastic crates that you just recycle back. And so you're not having to run around to 20 different farmers. They're running around to 20 different farmers and they dump it off right at your door. I can't tell you how convenient it is.
And
And
you're
the food,
supporting local farmers.
yeah, the food is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's no poison in this food. I mean, it's just unbelievably fantastic. Okay, so the same thing applies to energy, shelter. What you're trying to do is revisit who you do everything with so that you are doing it with people you trust. And the big one gets down to where your retirement savings is because most people in their retirement savings are financing the worst stuff in the world. I mean, they are basically financing their own. I mean, it's like people financing gas chambers in Germany. Do you know what I mean?
Right. You mean
And
specifically with like the 401k, which
right,
like even the founder of the 401k has admitted that it's a failure. It was always meant to work in tandem with pension plans in the early 1980s, and then when pension
right.
plans disappeared, like the 401k is still limping along, and now all these companies are making it mandatory. Like if you go to work for Home Depot, they'll just auto enroll you because of course they get an incentive. Right.
Right.
So it seems like, oh, they're the good deeds. They're good Samaritans. Really, if you dig into it, of course, all the fees and everything else you're dealing with on the 401k is a
Well,
scam.
the problem is you've transferred a lot of money out of family control
Mm,
into institutional control, and the more obfuscated things get. It
yeah.
was really fun when because I'd been on Wall Street for many years, and then I went to Washington and then started my own company. And it wasn't until many years later I became an investment advisor. It's the one thing I said I would never do. But when I finished the litigation, it was the only thing people would hire me for. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm an investment advisor. Anyway, and one of the things it was shocking to me because my first client came to me and they said, I want you to help me. I said, I'm not an investment advisor. They said, I don't care. I'll pay you just and I went back and forth and I said, finally, okay, best efforts. I'll just try. Well, it took me a day to realize they were being totally ripped off and I was shocked. And one of the things that happened is people would give me their portfolio and I'd start to click down to try and understand what they owned. Where's your money? What is it in? And what I discovered, there's layer after layer after layer after layer to figure out, where is this money really going? And it's become a very, the obfuscation is tremendous. So if somebody who's not financially literate says, I have no idea where my money is, I'm sympathetic because it's hard, to find out. And one of the keys to success, if you're dealing with your own money, is to come to the realization, it's a matter of coming agency to realize you have a right to know where your money is, to know that it makes sense, and to know that, it's good for you and for your financial returns. And if a financial professional or anybody you're dealing with, can't explain to you in English, and answer all those questions, they have a problem. You don't have a problem, and you just need to keep pushing harder, right? But people were intimidated. They didn't know. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was taking a Bible class in Washington at this wonderful church, and we had an amazing paralegal who was one of the teachers, and she worked in a big Washington law firm. And she came to me one night. She realized I was a financial person, and she said, all my savings other than my home is in my 401k at the law firm. But I'm trying to decide where to put the money, and I can't figure out, I don't understand the options, and I don't understand, this thing I want to put, it was a mortgage fund. She said I wanted to put money, but I can't understand it. The woman who does the administration is so mean to me. I feel very intimidated, but I don't want to put my money in something I don't understand. So I said, well, give me the prospectus. I'll look at it. So I get this prospectus. It was unbelievable. Okay. So I had just finished being the Assistant Secretary of Housing and the lead financial advisor. My company was the lead financial advisor for HUD. I was a partner at a big firm in Wall Street. I had an MBA from Wharton. I read this whole perspective. I could not understand one word. I couldn't understand it. So I said, unbelievable. Can I talk to the administrator? So she said yes. So I get on the phone with the administrator and with the paralegal. And this woman is so mean. I mean, she is really mean. And she's like, you're stupid. You can't. And finally, I just stopped and I pulled rank and I gave her my credentials. I said, I'm in Who's Who in America. I'm in Who's Who in Finance. I was a partner at Wolf. I ran the Federal Housing Administration, and I cannot understand this perspective. And if I can't understand it, the problem is not me.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to explain this. So she breaks down and admits she can't understand, and that's why she's being so mean, because she can't answer the questions either. So I said to her, I said, look, this paralegal's brilliant. She's really smart. I'm smart. I know a lot about the mortgage markets. You're smart. You're running the administration. Let's just sit down and go through this and see if we can figure it out. So we did for an hour. And by the time the hour was over, we finally figured out what it was and how it worked. But it was astonishing to me because I realized, this is all designed so that nobody can figure out what the mortgage fraud is that's going on.
Wow.
There's so much mortgage fraud, and you can hide it behind the federal credit. So you're getting a Fannie guarantee, or you're getting a federal housing guarantee. You don't have to worry, about the credit. And so you don't dive in, but you don't bother to read the prospectus. And if you did, you couldn't possibly understand it. And I think that's how $29 trillion of bailouts happen with mortgage fraud is, you have that kind of obfuscation of what's going on.
You saw gold, the price of gold today surge $170 just today on this news, back over $4,500 an ounce. When we first started talking about investing in gold prices were about $1,500 an ounce. That's why, China just bought up 20 tons of gold a few weeks ago in their central banks. President Putin just came out over the last 24 hours and said the U.S. dollar is collapsing as smart money moves away from the U.S. dollar and is moving towards gold and silver. And of course, you have these other countries now settling transactions using BRICS currency, moving into this new world. It's a crazy time. So smart investors aren't waiting until the headlines turn negative, which it is now. But of course, you see the writing on the wall. Hopefully, they make their moves while the market is still strong. And, you could say the market is still strong right now. Stock market, you see a lot of companies doing pretty well in the AI sector, up and down, doing pretty well. But smart money is moving, looking for ways to protect what they've earned. One option is to use a gold IRA from our friends at Lear Capital. You've heard us talk about having a gold IRA. I have one. Natali has one. It lets you add physical gold or silver right to your retirement savings, giving you another way to diversify that's outside of Wall Street and helps you prepare for whatever comes next. Could be time to start thinking about protection for your family. So Lear is a company that Natali and I have been using for years, more than $3 billion in transactions. They're the best in the business. I strongly urge you to give Lear 10 minutes just on the phone. Have a conversation with them. They're an American company. They will answer the phone. Imagine that. Call them 1-800-613-3557. And while you're on the phone, be sure to ask them how you could qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus gold or silver. Don't keep putting this off. Get free information today to protect your family. Call 1-800-613-3557. That's 800-613-3557. Or go to learredacted.com. When you look at, so I really wanted to touch on housing today and the U.S. dollar, and maybe that's a good segue to talk about that. Seeing all of these homes across Florida right now for sale at 30% below what they bought them for a few years ago. You see, obviously, what's happening with the borrowing. The new announcements from the Treasury this week, and now we're about to eclipse that $40 trillion level of U.S. debt, borrowing an additional $700 billion. First of all, maybe we just talk about housing in America right now, and we're also seeing interesting new construction versus existing housing. For the first time in I think forever, prices of existing housing are going up below or over the top of new construction. So resale prices of homes. Anyway, what is your assessment right now of where Americans are for the home, owning their own home as not a performing asset, but an asset, and renting versus that, or interest rates, all of those pieces?
So we have what I call a negative return on investment economy, which the majority of the economy, if you go into any county, so America's 3,100 counties, if you go into any county, 40 to 50% of the income comes directly or indirectly from the federal government. It's a very Soviet economy. And we use the federal credit and federal subsidies, grants, appropriation spending to centralize and centralize and centralize. And the more you centralize, the more you drain the health out of the economy. So let me give you an example. On COVID, you said, okay, small businesses have to lock down and shut down, and big businesses stay open. So what happens? The market share of the small businesses gets sucked into the big businesses, which now own and control much more. And all that employment and all that healthy economy that was very productive gets wiped out. Right?
Right.
And so all that family wealth gets wiped out. Okay. That's a negative return. That's a plunder game. And it has a negative return because the economy you end up with after it's over, a few guys are richer, but the tax base and the GNP is shrinking. Okay. So what that means is you have less family wealth, less income in a place for people to buy houses, take care of them, et cetera, right? You're systematically wiping out the small firms and the small farms and the small businesses, right? And you're stripping the economy, you're weakening the economy. Okay. And so the problem that people have with housing is that, inflation, the monetary inflation and the games they're playing is driving up the cost of goods. But your income is going down because they keep whacking and destroying the independent businesses and the independent income, right? So you're getting financially weaker and weaker at the same time that the central banks are running a system with debt and monetary policy that's driving inflation up. So for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, what did the Fed do? It injected $5 to $6 trillion, not just into the economy, but directly, because they were buying from non-bank, they're buying, bonds from non-financial. So it was really interesting. Right after they did it, I had a client who had money in a big Swiss bank, and one of the retired Federal Reserve governors gave a presentation to the investors, in that bank, and said, we're going to have extraordinary inflation, because they knew as soon as they injected it that the shutdown would deflate and keep the inflation from popping up right away. But eventually, when you open the economy up, it would drive things dramatically. Okay, so let's come back to housing. I'm going to grossly oversimplify. I inject $5 to $6 trillion and I give it to my pals on Wall Street. Okay. Then I shut down all the small businesses and small farms. The guys on Wall Street now have $5 to $6 trillion that they can go buy businesses and land and suck up market share, right? So, so I give these guys $6 trillion to go shopping with, and I shut down these guys, so they're squeezed and they got to sell cheap, right?
Right.
And you get a consolidation, and it was fantastically successful. San Francisco, the report was 49 small businesses destroyed across the country, 35%. And shocking as it is, after we finished doing that, you had the small business in the heartland all support the president who led that effort.
It is remarkable, and it's obfuscation, because I wonder how it's different than just finishing up reading Ron Chernow's book on Rockefeller, and just interesting to go back post Civil War and think about. You have it up there on your shelf.
I'm looking for Plunder. So we have a big wrap up called Plunder
Uh-huh.
because it's really important for people to understand how these Plunder games work. Because if you can see the models and you can, our Plunder wrap up goes through what they did in Russia, we go through like
Yeah.
20 countries and show how the Plunder game worked. And we are now targets of a Plunder game. I mean, and COVID was a perfect example. It's been going on for decades, but it's accelerating.
With the help of the federal government, I guess what I was saying about Rockefeller is that this was all done, Standard Oil gobbling up all of these, little refineries under the pressure of it. But
Right.
to my mind, from what I understand, there really wasn't any sort of federal government involvement in that. It was really just the pressure from Standard Oil buying up a lot of these refineries, or maybe colluding with the federal government on prices and so forth, to artificially drive things down.
The invasiveness of the federal government is
Yeah.
extraordinary. It's just, and it's literally it's Soviet. I mean, it's just Soviet. It's unbelievable.
So when you see then all of these small businesses that have been consolidated and bought out, it was clear that that was going to happen to anyone really paying attention.
Mhm.
But that how would the federal government then come in and try to help these businesses? And now what you're seeing, of course, is this AI build out. It seems like further consolidation. Maybe you can talk about the AI piece of this with these larger companies now, and maybe that whole efficiency layer that's rolling in under and with the full backing of the federal government, which is, as you talk about, this control grid.
So we just published an article, we sponsored it by Taylor Hudak on taxpayers' money going into the data centers. And the data centers are heavily, heavily subsidized by taxpayers' money. And Taylor's writing a part two on the corporate investment and private investment in data centers. And what you discover when you dig into the private money, it's government money coming in at the corporate level and then the corporate putting into data centers. So we're back to the taxpayer. And we are watching a tsunami of taxpayer money financing the data centers. And it makes no economic sense unless you assume that the return is complete control that allows you to basically take all the assets. Right. So it's plunder. If you can get the control grid, then the WEF, it's 2030 and you have no assets can come true. You're talking about a mechanism that can take everything. And or it can, slowly work it out. I mean, there are many different scenarios where this could play out. So now what's interesting is if you look at different countries, how they're using AI, and the real AI superpowers in the United States and China. But if you look at how China's using it, China is, from my understanding, is much more focused on applying it for productivity in manufacturing and services. And the reality is, if you look at their performance on the manufacturing, they're so far ahead of us, it's frightening. It is
By leaps and bounds. Leaps and
by
bounds.
leaps and bounds. Now, China has some real economic problems, and I don't want to underestimate them. But if you look at what they're doing to apply technology, we're applying technology for control, and they're applying technology to make something better, faster, cheaper. and and you're going to see a wave of enormous deflation coming from Asia into Europe and the United States because we literally cannot compete.
This is fascinating. I'm glad you brought up China. I wanted to go there. You see this rift. I think really it's the tale of the United States versus China right now. Almost sort of a tear down the middle of the world between these two competing giants. You see the U.S. sort of desperately trying to prop up Japan and its currency over the past few days. China doing what it's doing with manufacturing and capacity, and we're trying, the United States, the Trump administration now cutting off the import of humanoid robot component pieces up to the FCC voting 65% of those components and things need to be built within the United States, not getting them from China. So if you're Elon Musk and you're relying on building out your Optimus program and all of these things with these component parts and actuators and things like that coming from China, the Trump administration just said, sorry, 65% of those things for your Optimus robots need to now come from the United States. And then, oh, by the way, by the year, I think 2030, that then moves up to 80% or over 80% needs to be in the United States. Well, good luck with that. So this war between the U.S. and China, I'd love your thoughts on that, and the U.S. propping up Japan.
This is like the Siamese twins having a fight. It's not going to come apart, right?
Right.
The United States and China are totally dependent on each other. Now, China's a lot less dependent because they've built their export markets way away from the United States, so it's not such a big percent. But China is deeply, I mean, America is deeply dependent on China. I live in Tennessee. If you look at the percent of imports that come from China, Tennessee would shut down. And
Right.
here's the look at it. Who built China? It was U.S. investment. I can tell you stories of big government operations where somebody got the call, a team comes in from China, and they spend a month giving them all their intellectual capital, all their materials, all their manuals, all their diagrams, all their charts for free, just transfer, right? So, yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, there was massive investment out of the United States into China. So when the financial coup started in fiscal 1998, right at that moment, it was when the head of CalPERS said to me, largest pension fund in the country, they have given up on the country. They are moving all the money out starting in the fall. They're going to reinvest it in Asia. Okay.
Wow.
And that's exactly when Carlyle, money's suddenly disappearing from HUD and DOD magically. And all of a sudden, Carlyle, who people had hardly ever heard of, has $1 billion to invest in China. What a coincidence. Everybody's like, how did they get money to invest? Nobody's ever heard of these guys. They're brand new. And all of a sudden money is pouring like a tsunami into China. So who built China? We did. So, we are deeply without China, Walmart would go bankrupt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you look at the quote unquote war with China, at one level, the Siamese twins are punching. On the other level, they're totally joined at the hip. So, this is a more complex story. And if you look at the people who are managing the economy globally, they are purposely bringing China up. Deutsche Bank just agreed to run an exchange on the Chinese currency, and I'm assuming they're going to be on the SIP system, which is the alternative to Swift.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the U.S. dollar. I mean, where do you see? Well, you can see this, war over the petrodollar right now, and all the talks about the rise of the BRICS currencies, or the BRICS currency backed by some form of gold. Russia, Brazil, China, India as the big leaders in this, moving away from the U.S. dollar. Is that flight real? Is the U.S. dollar $40 trillion in debt in the United States? Is the U.S. dollar really in trouble?
So the U.S. is in trouble. I don't see the dollar system right. I see the dollar system right now still being dangerous and dominant. I don't see it's slowly innovating. If you look at what they want to do with the crypto rails, with stable coins and digital tokens, they are planning on using those vehicles to essentially take the US stock market from 70% of the global market to 90% and bring 4 billion people into the dollar from their currencies, from their
Can you
other,
explain for the layperson that doesn't understand stable coins? This is such a brilliant point, which is, okay, forget oil. We're going to now use crypto. So if you want a stable coin, crypto coin, it's going to be backed by the US dollar, USDT, I think, right? So it's a 1-for-1. If you want to be on the blockchain in there, is that right?
Here's how it works. The Genius Act passed last year, which created the regulatory infrastructure to really dramatically grow the stablecoin market. Okay. Think of a stablecoin as a dollar stablecoin as a dollar treasury bill.
Okay.
Okay. So I put $1 into a stablecoin, and then that dollar buys a treasury bill, which collateralizes the stablecoin.
Huh.
So I'm using a treasury bill as a currency. Okay.
So where I wouldn't normally want to buy one, now I am, in order to be on the playing field in the crypto space to be able to transact.
If you're in a, you name the country around there, if you're in Argentina and you're buying a stablecoin, you're basically pouring money to finance the US military to come and control you. Right?
Right.
Well, but here's why you would do it. Here's why you would do it. So it's important to understand how this works. Do you remember in 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was in Washington. Everybody was having detailed conversations saying we have to have meetings and discussions and treaties and agreements to merge East Germany with West Germany again. And, it will take 10 years. It'll be very complicated. The chancellor didn't want any of that. He offered a sweet premium to the East Germans for the Deutschmark. 24 hours, the whole country's unified. He just tendered for the East Germans through the currency, right? And that's what America wants to do. They want to go out with the stable coins. So we're in the rulemaking now, but in the beginning of 2027, they want to offer, and they think they can grow by the end of the decade. They can put out $4 trillion of stable coins because they want you to get off of your local currency and out of your local banks and into US dollar stablecoins. Right now, why would you do that? During the covert operation in Iran, the Iranian currency dropped 94% against the US dollar. If you're in the Iranian currency and it's dropping 94% against the dollar, early on, you're gonna get out of the Iranian currency and go to stablecoins. Now, why would you not do it? The Secretary of the Treasury, Bassant, said a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Oh, we just seized $1 billion of Iranian wallets." Why would you go into stablecoins if then suddenly your money isn't safe and can be seized? Okay. But that's what they're planning on doing. They're planning on that. But they're not just planning on doing that. They're planning on taking stocks and bonds. So DTC, which is the registrar for stocks and bonds, 114 trillion of stocks and bonds, they're planning on issuing digital tokens so that you can trade 24/7 all over the world in the US stock market. And some firms are saying they're going to offer 20 times leverage margin. Okay. So you think sports betting is bad or poly market is bad and prediction markets is bad. Wait till you see this. Imagine globally, everybody in the world that you can reach through a mobile payment system can trade the US stock market 24/7 with 20 times margin. Okay. So if you look at the tools that are being amassed to build a bigger bubble than the bubble we're in now, hold on to your pants because I've lived through many, many bubbles, and I've never seen tools amassed to blow as big a bubble as somebody's hoping to build.
This is incredible. I mean, we just saw, Leopold, whatever his last name is, of course, who was heavily levered with massive amounts of margin for his hedge fund explode 2 weeks ago and collapse and I don't know, $40 billion or whatever, because he was heavily levered. And when the AI market went down, boom, margin calls like crazy. So I can only imagine 20x what that's going to look like. It's
with 4 billion new participants in the market.
Right, because Leopold, to whatever you say about the guy, he was very, very smart. So very, very smart investor, and that happened to him. Now imagine all these people who are just jumping in like Kalshi or Poly Market trying to trade the latest meme stock.
Right. Okay, so hold on. So institutions all around the world are not buying treasuries. And the reason they're not, there are multiple reasons, but one of the reasons they're not buying treasury is if you look at how treasuries have performed against any other market, so gold and stocks, TLT, which is the 20-year treasury ETF, is in the basement. It's just sliding into the sewer, but it's the workhorse that provides all the money to pump up the stocks, right? And the
Right.
stocks are flying because the stocks are flying on a tsunami of government subsidy, government contracts, government tax benefits, whatever. And so the workhorse is getting drained. And meantime, the guys with the stocks in the plunder game are flying. So people around the institutions around the world are saying, no, I don't want it. And that's why we're seeing the yield on the 10-year and the 30-year go so high. I mean, it's really in the danger zone. So so institutions all over the world are saying we're rejecting treasuries. And what the treasury is now doing is saying, okay, with stable coins and digital tokens, we can go out to 4 billion retail. So the institutions are rejecting us. We'll just go straight to the people. And if they can create those train tracks, that's train track can also be facilitate lending. So suddenly you have the American farmer in a debt trap, but now you can get all the global farmers in a debt trap.
Buying up U.S. treasuries, maybe surreptitiously, they don't really know they're doing it just to be involved in this new boondoggle. And it's art in many ways, it's propping up the United States government as this cash printing machine.
Right. But they'll come into stable coins to avoid the slide in their own currency. So the Argentine currency, as I said, down 99% the last 10 years, down 93% the last 5 years. If your currency's sliding, and it will probably slide if the US is targeting you to slide, if the financial bazooka is causing you to slide, then you're going to want to get out of the peso and into stable coins because you don't want to slide with it, right?
Wow. What about the yen? I mean, because we keep hearing about Japan dumping treasuries, and then here we come in and pump up their currency. Like I don't understand that mechanism. How is that happening?
They're one of the largest holders. I think they're at this point they're the largest sovereign holder. They've been downsizing, but if you look at the squeeze they're in because of energy, because of what's happening with the energy markets globally, they're in a squeeze. Now they've been using a lot of the oil from their reserve funds, but they need treasuries for a variety of reasons to deal with the squeeze or to intervene with the yen themselves. And they've been raising interest rates to defend the yen. So they needed to sell treasuries because they needed the money. It's a reserve, so they need the reserve to deal with their situation. US doesn't want Japan dumping treasuries because and this gets back to the war strategy. They can't win the war if the bond market runs away from them. And so what they want what the Japanese to do is they're trying to get Fed access to the repo facility so that Japan can get the money they need by basically repoing the treasuries, which is, you don't sell them, you post them and you get money overnight, from the repo market. So they're trying to just not have those treasuries dump into the market because the way traditionally in really since World War II, the way the US wins wars is they have a physical war and a financial war. And what they need in the physical war is just to keep it going forever, in part because there's major grift coming off of the weapons and the purchases. But they don't need to win the war, they need to win the economic part of the war. So if they can exhaust the other country and control its resources and end up with the institutional power in terms of the markets and everything else, they win. And it looks like they lose. We went to the Middle East for 20 years and we lost everything. No, they didn't lose. The Iraq revenues, oil revenues, are deposited at the New York Fed. The Venezuela oil revenues are deposited at the Treasury. They didn't lose. They just spent a fortune, and the reason they could do that is because of the bond market. If you read Sun Tzu, have you ever read Sun Tzu, The Art of War?
Years ago, yeah.
The Art of War is a is a military philosophy for somebody who doesn't have a bond market. Also, is a military philosophy for somebody who has a bond market, because there you want to win by, enduring because you can outspend.
I want to ask you about the war because you're bringing it up in a second. But before I lose my train of thought on this 20x influx of stable coins, like who's going to benefit the most? Like, are there companies right now, are positioned, people like, the Trump accounts, Robinhood, or are there big crypto companies that are just sitting there salivating, waiting for this?
For the stablecoin push?
Yeah, for this 20x push of 4 billion people flooding into this new
Oh, yeah.
24/7 trading market.
Yeah. So I think they're absolutely companies salivating. I don't spend much time watching them or trying to figure out who's going to make money. I spend all my time trying to figure out how to pull the rug out from under the whole game.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, how do we?
well, here's how we do it. First, and first we do everything we can to keep cash and analog alive. Because the problem is not that they blow another bubble. The problem is they get a 100% digital system, and then we're cornered. We're in a slavery system. So you want to keep cash alive and you want to keep analog alive. So that's number one.
And when you say analog, are you talking not to be esoteric, but are you talking just in every part of our life, like the movies we own, the video game, like all of it? We want actual physical.
Anytime you can strip the surveillance system out of your life, it's good. Just, if you come into my kitchen, I have all my equipment in my kitchen is 100% mechanical. There is no digital sensor anywhere, right? And it feels great.
Yeah.
It's also very simple. Never breaks down.
Well, it's also great for your body too, right? You don't have like Wi-Fi signals and 6G signals flooding through your body with EMF radiation on top of it, right?
Anyway, but the big thing is keep cash alive because the slavery system requires all digital. So that's number one. Number two, and we have, if you come into our financial transaction freedom, come into Solari.com, you go to the financial transaction freedom. We have a whole team cash and we have model legislation, because if you can get state legislation where government has to accept cash, it can't not accept cash. You're really making some big progress. Idaho,
What
we
about
have
gold and silver? Because a couple of states have now started. I think Florida, maybe Oklahoma, have now started accepting gold as legal tender, right? And silver maybe as well.
So here's the thing. I love gold and silver. A lot of the states are being encouraged to do digital gold and silver, and digital gold and silver is just another form of programmable money.
Yeah.
This is about keeping analog. If you come into Solari, we have an app which will help you trade locally with gold and silver coins. And if your local area wants to put together a way of trading with gold and silver coins, that's fabulous, because then you can use for transactions something that's holding value. It's very volatile. So people have to get used to the volatility. But, I think I love gold and silver as long as it's real.
Right. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. So analog and cash. And,
So the second thing, if you look at our model legislation, the three pieces. One is cash and supporting state requirement to accept cash. The second is either legislation or a constitutional amendment, the right to a non-digital life. A citizen has a right to interact with government on the required necessary things in a non-digital way. You can't require me to have a digital ID to pay my state taxes or interact with the state. Okay. The third thing is to put guardrails up on programmable money under the guise of state consumer protection. So you cannot compromise my basic human and constitutional rights by how you put an automatic third lock on the money. So we're just coming, this is the one I'm going to send out. We just put it up in a PDF and we're going to put out the hard copy in September. Programmable money, the time for guardrails is now. And so we have model legislation. We're redoing it because we worked with Idaho and Utah to get that passed. Utah passed a bill to put up guardrails, but if we don't have those guardrails, then we can really get cornered. But I would say cash, the right to a non-digital life, and putting up the guardrails on programmable money. Any state can do that, and it would make enormous difference. The more states that do it, the better. We have briefings for legislators every month, and you can come in again to our financial transaction website. All the former ones we've done, we have videos, and there are people all over the country working to do this. It's pretty important.
Are you concerned the move away from cash like we're seeing in Europe? Are you worried that, first of all, I always talk about the banks. Like if you go to the bank and ask them to hand over your cash that afternoon, all of the cash that's in the bank, they're going to laugh at you, tell you to come back next week if you're lucky, and they'll maybe only give you a percentage of it. But are you concerned about that?
I just drove from the Netherlands to Lake Constance. In Austria, we had a meet and greet in Bregenz. So I was at the Bregenz Festival. Then I went to Milan. Then I came up to Lake Geneva. Then back to the Netherlands. Everywhere I went, I bought. I paid for gas with cash. I paid almost everything with cash. So the big hotel bills on the event we were doing, I paid with wire transfers or credit cards, but everything was cash. And I see more cash use in Europe than I did. At the beginning of the pandemic, everybody thought, the small business guys thought, you know, credit cards and electronic transactions, which are very efficient in Europe, was better. And then they realized, oh, this is surveillance and they're stealing my market share.
Wow.
And suddenly cash got more. The big one, though, and this was amazing, was after the floods in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, the central banks, two of the central banks in Scandinavia came out and said, you know something? It was a mistake to try and go non-cash. You cannot depend on the electricity to work.
Huh.
We have disasters, we have problems, things go wrong. We need cash. We're going to walk cash back up.
Wow.
I
That's
know. Because they were the leaders. They were the leaders. Finland, Norway, Sweden, they were the leaders. So,
well, that's what I'm concerned about, this sort of digital wallet idea that the Fed would be behind this. I'm being maybe I'm speaking like a fifth grader, and you're, master's level, me trying to explain this, but
no, we're going to stop. We're going to stop letting that. In other words, everybody at a fifth grade level should be able to understand this. And if no, it's because we're not explaining it properly.
Yeah, no, and that's why I'll be the fifth grader. You can be the educator here, because the way I see this idea of this digital wallet that they want, we saw a test bed rollout of what they were trying to do in Ukraine with the Dia app. And so where everything would live in this one app. So you'd have your digital wallet. If the government wants you to send you like a stimulus check, some sort of universal basic income, that's why they want you to move there. So they'll kick off the account with like, hey, $2,000 in free US stable coins, and in this new wallet app that the Fed is rolling out, the new Trump app, whatever they'll call it. So everyone will sort of move over to that, because they'll get this like financial incentive that's backed by these stable coins, trying to move us into this digital future. And we've got to fight that. So do you see that coming as a reality, or am I being too fear-mongerish with that?
Well, I think they're going to do everything they can to get us into these train tracks. Remember, they want to own the channel, and they want us in the channel they own.
Yeah.
So are they going to use free money? Sure. Are they going to use force? Sure. Are they going to, there are 1,000, it's like the joy of cooking. There are 1,000 recipes. Could they use all of them? But here's the thing. You have to go back to basics. You're in a war. Somebody wants to control you. And the question you have to decide is, are you going to assert agency and decide to be free? And then the question is, how do you do it? Now, somebody offers you $2,000 in stable coins, there is a real argument you ought to accept it, immediately convert it in your local currency and go buy gold.
Right.
So I have no problem with you taking $2,000 of stable coins and cashing it out and buying gold right away. Great.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. Yeah, or buying vodka or other things that you can trade, right? Like at the fall of the Soviet Union.
Russia, the most important currency and the collapse was vodka.
Yeah. So we have a whole bunch of vodka that every time we go to like Sam's Club or one other place, we always buy some whiskey and vodka, some American whiskey or bourbon, and stock up on that.
I have crates in Hickory Valley, Tennessee. I have crates and crates of these little pint. I have a stepbrother who's got a a liquor store, and I always get these. I go to a store and I get these little
Smart.
bottles.
Yeah, that's the currency. Yeah, if everything collapses. I guess, before I let you go, I'm curious. I wanted to talk about the war, and when we look at the shooting match that happens between the United States, Israel, Iran, I always want to look the layer deeper, which is the financing arm of who's benefiting here. Is it really a war? Is it a hot war, or is it really a financial war over the U.S. petrodollar? How do you see things playing out with Iran?
So I see this as two kinds of war. One is a war by the United States that is includes Ukraine, includes Iran, includes the whole planet. And again, if you go to this energy infrastructure collection we have at Lear, you'll see it. It's the goal is to convert the petrodollar into a petrogas dollar, and to control the trade routes and control enough of the energy resources to basically get in the enough in the catbird seat to defend the dollar. So I think, and if you look at the US LNG sales since this started, it's off the charts. I mean, the
Right.
US oil and gas industry is just doing gangbusters. And if you look at the control we're asserting of the trade routes, it's pretty powerful. But it's not just in the Middle East, it's all around the world. And it's funny, if you look at what we're selling into Asia, it's the Gulf states that are getting slaughtered. And our LNG businesses, our sales are up wildly. It's the Gulf that's getting slaughtered. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part, though, is I think they want Iran and the BRIC countries on essentially their control grid, right? So if you listen, if you were at the G20 meeting in 2024, everyone pledged allegiance to CBDC and digital IDs,
Right.
China, Russia, but they want to be their own, they want to control their systems. They don't want to be middle management. They want to be top management of they buy the model, but they want to control their model. And I think, Iran, if you look at the 7 countries in 5 years we were going to attack after 9/11, you had a whole series of central banks who weren't playing ball with our model. And so I think whether it's the oil or the money transactions, they want Iran in our model. And somebody told me, I don't know if it's true, I guess it was Alistair Crook told me, I think, that they were negotiating, Jared Kushner and Witkoff were negotiating with these, all these Iranian highly educated people, and Kushner, Witkoff were pointing to a picture of one of the Gulf states with the high skyscraper and said, see, if you do this deal, you can have those. You can have the Iranians look at them like, you guys are nuts. We don't want those. We want to be, we want to be independent. We don't want to be
We
dependent
don't
on
want
this
to be a
guy.
part of your Rothschild's banking system. We don't support usury. We don't want to be a part of this.
Right.
You have to believe. So that's, I guess, at the heart of it, right? It's not
Right.
about a
The heart
nuclear.
of it,
It's not a nuclear program.
channel war. The Anglo-American Alliance wants you to go through our channel, and you want your own channel. And the question is, whose channel is gonna run this part of the economy? Now, the funny thing about it is, as they're competing with the Iranians, they're turning around and having the same war with their domestic population. Because many people in the domestic population also don't want to be controlled.
Hmm.
Right. So they're trying to implement the control grid on Iran, but they're also trying to implement the control grid on all of us. Those data centers, the reason you need so much data center capacity is because you're talking about the data and spatial control, not just for America or North America, for the whole dollar system.
So
Ah,
when we hear about, okay, there's 809 data centers being built right now. There's about 4,000 that are contracted through the next year to year and a half. We're nowhere near we're building out massively. So for people say that we're in an AI bubble, that I don't buy that, because I think, to your point, this is the answer. So domestic surveillance, all of that living in different data centers, but not just Americans, all of it as tied to this dollar system.
Right. So there's two reasons I think you need such big data centers. One is if you look at spatial control, it involves a lot of videos. It's very data capacity. The requirements are big because you got the fly camera videos, you got a lot of video.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one thing. But the second thing is if you're running the dollar system, you're running it for the whole planet. If you read, there's a great book, if you haven't read it, called Underground Empire,
No, I
about
haven't.
how the data works through the cables, the undersea cables and all the sort of cable systems to come back to the big data centers in the United States. And that's why one of the most interesting stories of the whole war with Iran was when Iran announced they were asserting control of the underground cables in the Straits of Hormuz, and they wanted to tax the data going through it. Because
Right.
now you're threatening the whole global dollar system, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is why Elon Musk gets such big contracts. So let's get the cables out from underneath the ocean and just put them in space so that.
Well, here's because this is how you follow the war in a way that's really interesting. The other most interesting one of the so I thought the fight over the cables in the Straits was one of the most interesting stories. But the other one, and I give Alistair Crook for digging this out. When we did the first attack on Iran in 2025, what did we do? We had the Starlink system and we had Where's Daddy and Lavender, the Palantir IDF systems. And they were able to basically track 92 million Iranians and identify who's a leader and who's not and assassinate them, in their home, killing them, their families, their neighbors, right? And when that happened, it was a short war, but the chill went out all across leadership around the world, and everybody's kissing the ring because they know it's not just the Iranians, it's you know, it's wherever a satellite is flying overhead, they can be snuffed out like that. And they've announced the new game of war is, we feel free to kill the leaders, right? So that was a big bell that rang quietly throughout the leadership around the world. Okay, so we come into the second war, and in 2026, and the first thing that happens is, the plan is we're going to have a covert operation that installs regime change. We're not going to have a war. We're not going to attack. So this was, started at the end of 2025. And they put operators throughout Iran with huge amounts of dollar bills with money and with Starlink uploads. And they were seeding all these riots around Iran. And it's very interesting to hear the story of how they get the riots going. But you're talking about a major covert operation. And somehow, I still don't know how, the Iranians figured out how to shut down Starlink. And that's
Right.
something that didn't happen in the Ukraine. It didn't happen before, but suddenly the Iranians figured out how to shut down Starlink, and they were able to round up all the operators, the covert operators, and shut the whole regime change down. Despite the fact that Basan and the American financial bazooka had driven the Iranian currency down 94%. They stopped it. And that's why the invasion, because that whole covert operation failed because the Iranians had beat the Starlink game. And that's why
Russia.
it's got to be Russia or China.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that you have to remember: the Persians have an average IQ of 107. The Chinese have an average IQ of 107. America at this point has an average IQ of 98. We are talking about, the Persians and the Chinese are ancient cultures, and they are smart, smart, smart. They are
And they're
highly
survivors.
educated. They are, and Persian. I don't know if you've ever spent any time with Persians. They are amazing people and
I
very,
have.
very
Yeah, my
right.
wife grew up neighbors with Persians right in the Fremont, California area. So many families, very close, very fun, very kind, very smart people.
Amazing people and a great. We did in Milan. We listened. Alistair did this amazing presentation on spatial consciousness, starting with the Persians and the Middle Eastern cultures, and we're going to publish it on Tuesday. It was supposed to be just for the Solari builders, but it was so amazing. I said, you have to hear this because if you study science, if you study plasma, what you understand is the world is alive and intelligent. And if you're going to understand how to operate during this period of remarkable change, you have to change your consciousness to understand we're interacting with all of life. And it's important financially because all financial wealth comes from life. And a spatial consciousness that's based on the premise that everything is alive and intelligent is a very different consciousness than the hyper materialism, that I was trained to do at Wharton and Wall Street. And so we're dealing with a very different consciousness when we go to Asia and when we go to the Middle East. And
I love that.
Yeah, we're going to be forced. We've had the luxury in the dollar system of not having, of being able to operate in a very simple model of reality, and that's now being torn under. And anyway, that's what you're trying to do in your show, is teach everybody about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a positive person, so to hear you have this positivity is buoying my spirits. That's for sure. And I think just seeing it just casually in conversations, anecdotally, around the world now, around the surveillance state, around moving towards analog, I think we're seeing a real moment, and I hope we can fight back against it.
No, you're seeing a moment where people who are basically healthy and productive are looking at the centralized system and saying, something, I just want to get as far away from those guys as I can. It's the ook factor. They're yucky. They're yucky. Let's get away from them. Right.
Yeah, it's so disgusting. Even to see people still supporting it online, it's just like it scratches my head. People you thought you knew and trusted, and oh my gosh, and you're like, how are you supporting?
Most people who do that are well paid, and they're just trying to earn money for the kids, right? They got kids to support.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I want everyone to go visit the Solari Report, SOLARI.com, like solar with an I at the end of it, Solari.com. Check out the Solari Report. It's incredible wealth of information. It's always a bookmark that I visit very often. It's been a real treat having you here, Catherine. I really appreciate it.
Before we go, can I just give you a little homework?
Please.
Okay, and this is to help you understand the incredible opportunity. If you go on our website just to latest and you go down, there's an article I published on July 21st. It was an internal memo just to our team to help them understand how to organize and take advantage of this opportunity. And our editor said, I'd written it on the taking the train up to Cambridge, and our editor said, no, we got to publish it. Everybody got to read it. It's called How to Identify the Independent Pro-Decentralization Team and Keep Conflicts of Interest at Arm's Length. And it's basically about how to find and network with the people who want to be independent and don't want to suck up into the centralized systems, and how to find them and how to organize with them. So take a look.
So it's called How to Identify the Independent Pro-Decentralization Team and Keep Conflicts of Interest at Arm's Length. Is that the name of it? Yeah, I see it here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right on. If people check out Solari.com and you click on menu at the upper left-hand side of the screen and then scroll down to top sections, click latest, and then scroll down from there, you'll find the article kind of halfway down the page. It was published in July 21st.
Yeah.
So check it out there. Such a wealth of information. Really get me flipping my brain in all sorts of incredible ways. So I'll let you get back to the beautiful Netherlands gardens there. It looks beautiful there. Catherine Austin Fitz, it's been our great pleasure to have you here. I hope you'll come back.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching Redacted. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free if you want to follow us or subscribe. And if we brought you any value at all, please consider sharing this video with a friend or a loved one on social media. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.